The Atacama Desert looked like a lifeless place. To tourists, it was a land of surreal landscapes and star-filled skies. To scientists, a natural laboratory, untouched and silent. But for the 4 geologists from the University of Antofagasta, it hid something far beyond understanding. The expedition, led by Dr. Mauro Lira, aimed to study low-frequency subterranean sounds, inaudible to human ears. Some believed these sounds were tectonic activity. Others said they were just natural, acoustic distortions. But one pattern stood out. Rhythmic, repetitive, as if someone, or something, was trying to speak. On the 3rd day at sunset, the recording equipment detected the pattern again. Excited, Mauro decided they would set up camp directly over the strongest signal. His team, doctoral student Camila, geophysics technician Cesar, and veteran researcher Teresa, agreed, though a strange unease hung in the air. By midnight, Camila woke to what sounded like breathing, muffled and deep as though buried beneath tons of sand. She stepped outside. The desert was dead silent. No wind, no insects, no movement. But in the distance, she saw something impossible. The sand was moving, pulsing in circular waves as if something massive was shifting beneath the ground. She ran to wake the others. Cesar was missing. Teresa, shaken, said she'd heard her late brother's voice calling her outside. They searched for Cesar, shouting his name into the void. Nothing. No footsteps. No signs of a struggle. Mauro activated the ground radar, desperate to understand what was beneath them. What appeared on the screen made no sense. A huge, slowly moving circular mass directly under the camp. "It's breathing," Camila whispered. The recordings from that night captured disturbing sounds, human-like voices, distorted and overlapping, whispering broken phrases. When Teresa went out to retrieve one of the antennas, they heard her scream. By the time Camila and Mauro reached her, she was gone. All that remained was a patch of sand, melted and steaming, as if boiled from below. Mauro, slipping into denial, insisted it was a natural phenomenon. But Camila couldn't sleep. She heard voices in her dreams, felt vibrations under her feet. By dawn, only Mauro remained. His fingernails were broken, his eyes wide and unblinking. He kept repeating one phrase: "The sand responds. The sand responds." A rescue team found him 6 days later, severely dehydrated, fingers raw from digging into the earth with his bare hands. He was in shock. The surviving audio tapes were mostly destroyed by heat and static. Only one segment was intact. A deep, gravelly voice whispered in Spanish, "No hay silencio, solo hambre." There is no silence, only hunger. Authorities sealed, off the site. But locals in nearby villages say that on the driest nights, if you walk alone, you might hear the sand whisper your name. A voice you thought you'd forgotten. A voice that knows where you are. Rinaldo Montenegro had been a truck driver for over 30 years. He had driven through every kind of weather: torrential rain, hailstorms, icy mountain passes. Nothing frightened him anymore. At least, that's what he believed. It was the middle of March when he found himself alone on Highway 89, a cracked and forgotten road that cut through the Sonoran Desert in Arizona. He was hauling industrial equipment from Tucson to a remote outpost near the Mexican border. The night was quiet, and the road seemed endless, just the hum of the engine and the occasional glint of moonlight bouncing off the mirrors. At 3:12 a.m. he saw it, a wall of dust and sand rising in the distance too high and fast for any natural storm. Within minutes, the wind slammed into his truck like a living thing. Sand hissed against the windshield, the sky turned dark, and visibility dropped to zero. Rinaldo slowed down and eventually pulled over. He turned on his hazard lights and waited, planning to ride it out. But the storm didn't move on. It circled the truck, wrapping it in a cocoon of noise and pressure, as if something was watching and waiting. At 3:37 a.m., he heard a knock on the cab door. He froze. Another knock. Then silence. He peered into the side mirror. Nothing. He stepped outside cautiously, eyes squinting against the storm, and that's when he saw them. Barefoot prints, human, circling the truck in a tight loop. He rushed back inside, locking the doors. Tried his CB radio, only static. Tried again. Nothing. At 3:48 a.m., a shape emerged from the swirling sand. Figure, female. She walked against the wind like it wasn't even there, hair floating unnaturally behind her. Reynaldo's blood ran cold. It was his mother, dead for 20 years. She smiled gently and placed a hand against the window. Her lips moved, saying something he couldn't hear. Then, in the blink of an eye, she vanished into the storm. By 4 a.m., the sandstorm stopped. The air cleared. Reynaldo started the truck and drove like a man possessed. Maybe it was exhaustion. A hallucination. That's what he told himself. Until the next night. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the storm returned. And again the night after that. And the one after that. Each night brought new visitors. His younger brother, who had drowned in his teens. A co-worker who died in a wreck. An ex-lover who had vanished during a trip to Chile. They came one by one, always at the same time, always through the same storm, and each brought a message. Whispers, pleas, warnings. On the fifth night, something changed. Outside the cab stood a younger version of himself, eyes wide with fear, skin pale, lips trembling. His double slammed his palms against the window and screamed something that finally cut through the noise. Don't stop. Never stop. But Reynaldo opened the door anyway. He stepped onto the sand and disappeared. The truck was found 2 weeks later, engine still warm. Doors locked from the inside, no footprints around it, no signs of a struggle. Investigators were baffled. The logbook was untouched. Only the radio played on a loop, broadcasting a garbled voice. Reynaldo's own. The storm returns. Until you stay. Since then, drivers say the desert has a rhythm of its own. A time when the wind starts to hum. A time when the past comes knocking. And if you're alone on Highway 89 at 3:12 a.m., don't stop. No matter what or who you see. Visiting the Salar de Uyuni had been a dream for Fernanda and Lucas for years. The endless white horizon, the surreal silence, the reflection of the sky on the ground. It was the kind of beauty that made people feel both small and eternal. They had planned everything carefully. Light backpacks, extra water, and one shared goal. Camp far from the tourist crowds, in the middle of nowhere. Against the advice of their Bolivian guide, they wandered off-route on the third day. The salt remembers, the guide had warned in a hushed voice. It keeps what it's given. They laughed it off. Superstition, they said. By late afternoon, a fine mist began to rise from the ground. Salt dust, weightless, slowly veiling the sun. Within minutes, the landscape lost all reference points. The GPS went blank, their compass spun. They had no idea where they were. That's when they saw it. A structure deep in the mist, impossible in a place where nothing should exist. It was a building made entirely of salt. Salt bricks, salt walls, even salt furniture. It looked like a temple, or maybe a forgotten house built by people who never left. Lucas called it an ancient sculpture gallery and began filming with his phone, narrating every step like a travel vlog. Fernanda was uneasy. There was a presence inside those walls. Not a ghost, not a shadow, but something watching in complete stillness. Inside, they found an altar, its base covered in black salt and dried twigs. Symbols were carved into the walls, circles, spirals and rows of tiny faces. Above the altar, one sentence had been etched into the wall in fading Spanish. Aquí se honra el silencio. Que tu voz no despierte lo que duerme. Here we honor silence. Let not your voice awaken what sleeps. But they spoke. Lucas laughed. Fernanda whispered. They commented on the carvings, picked up strange artifacts. She asked him to stop filming. He shrugged her off. That night, they unrolled their sleeping bags on the salt floor. The wind was gone. The sky, black. At 2:17 a.m., Fernanda awoke, a crunching sound, like someone walking on salt just outside the building. She got up slowly. Her flashlight flickered. Footprints, barefoot and narrow, traced a perfect circle around the altar. She followed them until she saw the mirror. It hadn't been there before. Leaning against the far wall, old and cracked, the mirror reflected her. But not just her. A figure stood behind her in the reflection. Gaunt, motionless, faceless. She turned. Nothing. She ran to wake Lucas, but his sleeping bag was empty. A trail of black salt led out the door. Outside, the desert was dead still. No footprints, no stars, no wind, just white silence. She screamed his name into the night, no echo. When she returned, the mirror showed him again. Lucas, kneeling at the altar, salt crusting over his skin, mouth open in a silent scream. She grabbed a rock and tried to smash the glass. It wouldn't break. Whispers began to rise from the walls, soft, dry, like sandpaper on glass. The carvings glowed faintly, pulsing, and she understood. The silence wasn't a rule. It was protection. When morning came, the sanctuary was gone. A group of tourists found the spot days later, just a patch of crystallized salt, nothing unusual. Except for one thing, a mirror buried half in the ground. Inside it, two figures stood side by side, unmoving, their faces cracked like ancient porcelain, covered in salt. One looked like Fernanda, the other, Lucas.